If you think your silence is what hurts her the most, you may be misunderstanding the real power you hold. There is something far more unsettling than disappearing. And if you stay with me, you'll understand why this shift changes everything, not just for her, but for you. If this speaks to you at any point, quietly like the video and subscribe. Most men think pulling back into complete silence is the ultimate power move after a relationship fractures. You stop texting, you mute her stories, and you vanish into the shadows, convinced that your sudden absence will trigger panic. But here is the uncomfortable truth. If your silence is just a strategy designed to get a reaction, it isn't a power move at all. It is a performance. Deep down, you are still bound to her. You are sitting in the dark, counting the hours, checking your phone and waiting for her to notice that you are gone. That isn't strength. It is a loud, vibrating frequency of desperation that people can intuitively feel from miles away. Your silence carries a heavy weight of resentment and expectation, turning your absence into an active power struggle rather than a true separation. You are trying to use distance as a weapon to manipulate her feelings, but the only person being consumed by the tension is you. If you think disappearing is what hurts the most, you are completely misjudging where your actual leverage lies. There is something far more unsettling than a man who goes quiet out of anger, and it begins the moment you stop performing. When you treat silence merely as a tactical weapon, you enter a psychological trap of your own making. This is the illusion of the modern standoff. On the surface, you look unbothered, but underneath, your mind is a chaotic war zone of anticipation. You tell yourself you are executing a flawless strategy, yet you are still entirely oriented around her. You find yourself counting the days of non-contact like a prison sentence, constantly checking your phone for a notification that never comes, and fighting the agonizing urge to spy on her digital life. This internal friction isn't discipline. It is suppressed attachment masquerading as strength. You haven't actually stepped away from the relationship. You have just moved your obsession behind a curtain. Your nervous system remains helplessly hooked to an outcome you cannot control, leaving you emotionally fragile and reactive. Every hour that passes without a text feels like a personal defeat, proving that your quietness is just a loud plea for validation. True power cannot exist when you are secretly begging to be missed. As long as your behavior is designed to influence her next move, you aren't a free man, you are a hostage waiting for a sign. To break free from this trap, you must transition from tactical silence into true emotional sovereignty. This is where modern strategy fails and timeless philosophy begins. There is a massive psychological chasm between telling yourself, I am refusing to speak to you, and realizing, I no longer have the need to move in response to you. One is a temporary game meant to provoke a reaction. The other is a permanent transformation of your character. True sovereignty means you reclaim ownership over your own emotional landscape. You stop viewing your peace of mind as something that can be granted or revoked by another person's validation. You do not withdraw your attention to punish, to create mystery, or to force a sudden realization of your worth. Instead, you step back because you genuinely value your own mental clarity and refuse to lease out your headspace to uncertainty. This isn't about building a cold defensive wall or pretending you feel absolutely nothing. It is about becoming an anchor in your own life. When you stop anchoring your identity in a relationship that has fractured, you stop drifting with every changing tide. You are no longer navigating by her compass. You have returned to your own. When you achieve true emotional sovereignty, the dynamic undergoes a profound and invisible shift. Humans are deeply wired to detect subtle changes in emotional investment, and the moment you step into genuine neutrality, the other person senses it immediately. They don't just notice the absence of your text messages or calls, they feel the sudden, undeniable absence of emotional access. When you were using silence merely as a tactic, your energy was still entirely directed toward them. You were still holding the door open, waiting expectantly on the threshold for a response. That unspoken orientation provides an incredible layer of psychological comfort to someone, allowing them to pull away safely while knowing you are still anchored to their orbit. But when you peacefully and permanently close that door without a grand announcement, a dramatic argument, or a desperate need to prove a point, that comfort instantly vanishes. They suddenly realize that they can no longer reach out and touch your emotions at will. You are no longer waiting for them, no longer holding a space for them, and no longer available for intermittent validation. This sudden loss of access lands with a heavy, permanent weight that superficial silence can never match. Once this loss of access sets in, it shatters the predictable pattern of the relationship loop. Most interpersonal conflicts operate on a highly repetitive rhythm of pursuit and withdrawal, action and reaction, provocation and defense. When a connection begins to fracture, a specific script is typically followed. One person pulls away, the other panics, Text responses slow down, jealousy is triggered, and a frantic chase ensues until a temporary reassurance is reached. But when you step out of this exhausting cycle entirely, without any accompanying anger, drama, or bitterness, you create massive cognitive dissonance. The predictable version of you, the one who could be easily managed or triggered by a delayed reply or an ambiguous signal, no longer exists. By remaining completely steady and self-directed, you disrupt the entire rhythm they were accustomed to navigating. An aggressive or resentful man is incredibly easy to predict and neutralize because his emotions are still highly visible and easily leveraged. However, an emotionally grounded man who refuses to participate in a power struggle becomes an absolute enigma. Your quiet, unwavering stability forces them out of their comfort zone and into an unfamiliar reality where they can no longer dictate the emotional temperature. Reclaiming your psychological energy requires you to ruthlessly eliminate the hidden drainage occurring inside your own mind. Many men waste an immense amount of cognitive power playing a fictional version of life behind closed doors. You spend hours replaying old conversations, dissecting past texts, and meticulously planning what you would say if they finally reached out. You find yourself performing growth, hitting the gym, dressing better, or curation posting on social media, not for your own fulfillment, but with the secret hope that they will see it and finally understand your true value. This is a subtle form of emotional bankruptcy. The exact moment you release the desperate need to be seen, understood, or validated by someone who has stepped away from you, you instantly reclaim 100% of your personal power. Your actions stop being a calculated broadcast designed for an audience of one. You transition from a performer looking for applause to a builder focused entirely on the foundation of his own life. You stop imagining their reaction to your success and simply focus on the reality of your execution. When your growth becomes entirely private, anonymous, and self-directed, it transforms from a shallow marketing campaign into an unshakable asset. This shift marks the emergence of a self-respect hierarchy, which has absolutely nothing to do with toxic gamesmanship or forcing dominance. Toxic tactics are loud, aggressive, and designed to make someone else feel small so that you can feel big. True self-respect is entirely quiet. It is a fundamental understanding that your time, your focus, and your emotional currency are sacred resources that must never be bartered away for intermittent affection. When you walk away from a fractured dynamic, you are not attempting to punish them or execute a clever maneuver to gain the upper hand. You are simply reallocating your energy. You recognize that every ounce of psychological power you spend wondering about their perspective is an ounce of power stolen from your own future. Therefore, you deliberately reinvest that currency back into your physical health, your professional purpose, your daily disciplines, and your long-term goals. You are no longer placing another person's fleeting perception above your own unshakable self-concept. This reallocation of attention is incredibly disorienting to witness because it proves you have stopped looking up for approval and have started looking directly forward at your own vision. Entering this state of mind brings you to the ultimate test, becoming truly unaffected. There is a massive critical difference between acting out of bitterness and operating from a position of absolute neutrality. A bitter man is still deeply invested. His coldness is just a shield designed to hide his lingering resentment and hurt. Because he is still emotionally reactive, he remains highly vulnerable to any sudden shift, message, or breadcrumb of attention. But when you become unaffected, you are no longer playing a defensive game. You have reached a calm, objective baseline where your internal peace is entirely decoupled from external validation. If she reaches out to you, you do not panic, overanalyze, or spiral into immediate excitement. You respond with polite, grounded clarity. If she remains completely silent, your daily momentum does not falter for a single second. You are no longer navigating life based on chemistry, fleeting attraction, or emotional highs. Instead, you sit back and dispassionately observe patterns of behavior. You judge the reality of consistency rather than the illusion of potential. You are not detached from your humanity. You are simply permanently detached from dependency. This brings you face to face with the single most important question of your entire transformation. Why have you been spending so much psychological energy trying to figure out how to make them feel something when you are willing to feel so little for yourself? This is the exact moment the entire illusion of relationship strategy collapses. When you obsess over rules, count down days of non-contact, or try to calibrate the perfect detached response to a text message, you are still actively abandoning your own mind. You are keeping another person's choices at the absolute center of your universe, measuring your daily worth against a metric you can never hope to control. True emotional maturity demands that you immediately pivot your focus away from what is outside your power and direct it entirely toward what is. You cannot control their clarity, their timeline, or their emotional capacity, but you have absolute, uncompromising authority over your character, your habits, and your daily execution. When you deeply internalize this, you stop over-explaining yourself, you stop defending your basic value, and you stop negotiating for simple consistency. You reclaim your position as the sole author of your life. The ultimate reward of this journey was never about winning a tactical game or engineering a scenario to make someone miss your presence. The true destination is reaching a state of unshakable internal freedom where you finally refuse to abandon yourself ever again. When you first initiate space or go quiet, it often comes from a raw place of emotional survival. You need distance because the friction is overwhelming, and you need silence because the interaction leaves you drained. That is fundamentally human. But genuine growth occurs when that silence stops being used as a temporary defensive shield and starts becoming absolute clarity. It is clarity regarding what you tolerate, what you deserve, and the level of reciprocity you actually require in a partnership. By taking full responsibility for your own emotional ecosystem, you stop outsourcing your peace of mind to external validation. You no longer wait around for someone else to choose you in order to validate your existence or value. You step out into the world completely self-contained, anchored and rooted in your own path. And that quiet, undeniable freedom carries a psychological weight that mere silence could never replicate.